For our project, we researched the Second Amendment. We researched if the Second Amendment helps or hurts Americans. Some history of the Second Amendment is that it was originally proposed by James Madison shortly after the United States Constitution was officially ratified as a way to provide more power to state militias. The amendment gives citizens the right to bear arms as it was ratified on December 1791. The Second Amendment clearly states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Since the Second Amendment's ratification, Americans have been arguing over its meaning and interpretation. There are two sides of the argument, the collective side and the individual side. The collective side believes that the amendment was meant to provide collective rights. The individual side believes that the amendment was meant to provide rights to individuals. The collective side of the argument believes the Second Amendment gives each state the right to maintain and train formal militia units that can provide protection for its residents. The individual side of the argument believes the Second Amendment gives each citizen the right to own and possess guns. The two arguments have shaped the country's ongoing gun control debate. Those supporting an individual's right to own a gun, such as the National Rifle Association, argue that the Second Amendment should give all citizens, not just members of a militia, the right to own a gun. Those supporting stricter gun control, like the Brady campaign, believe the Second Amendment doesn't allow any individual to own a gun. Within gun control use, the National Crime Victimization Survey estimates approximately 100,000 defensive gun uses per year. Many people in rural areas also use guns for hunting, for either food or sport. Although firearms may be used in a positive way, there are also negative results of gun ownership. According to a report filled by the Washington State Department of Social Health Services, a child or teen is killed once every 7.5 hours with a gun, either by accident or by suicide. In 72% of these cases, the firearm was housed in the victim's own residence. Many of these weapons were locked away in a secure place, yet 48% of those who own guns do not equip them with child safety and trigger locks. Other negative results of gun ownership is the intent to use guns to injure others. On April 20th, 1999, 2 students from Columbine High School killed a teacher and 12 fellow students with semi-automatic weapons. But is gun control really necessary? There are pros and cons when it comes to gun control. One opinion exists that if teens or teachers were armed and trained in the use of guns, tragedies like Columbine would be less likely to occur. Gun control safety measures include a waiting period before buying a gun, mandatory gun registrations, purchaser background checks, and restrictions on certain types of guns, such as semi-automatics. Some of the pros for gun control include that regulations help keep guns out of the hands of irresponsible individuals. Also, some restrictions are placed on certain types of guns that may be purchased to help reduce the potential for misuse of these weapons. Safety training is also required with gun ownership, helping to reduce gun-related accidents. Child safety locks and handguns help eliminate a cause of many tragic accidents and injuries. There are also cons when it comes to gun control. One of them is that owning a gun enables people to defend themselves, which could result in accidents. Also, owning a gun, especially one for hunting, is part of American tradition. By federal law, there is no minimum age for long gun ownership, such as rifles or shotguns. Also, mandatory child safety locks add unnecessary expense for people who have no children. And gun control really doesn't address the problem of gun ownership by criminals and irresponsible individuals. Gun control regulations are not guaranteed fail-safes and can limit the legitimate use of guns by responsible, law-abiding citizens. The Supreme Court also plays a huge part in the Second Amendment. Throughout history, many cases have been brought before the Supreme Court regarding the Second Amendment. Included here are some landmark decisions. One of the first rulings occurred in 1875, United States versus Cruikshank. In this case, involving the Ku Klux Klan, the court held that the Bill of Rights restricted Congress, but not individuals, from the right to bear arms. The court stated that the Second Amendment restricts the power of national government, but not individuals. The Supreme Court took up on the issue again in 1894, Miller versus Texas. In this case, under federal law, Franklin Miller should have had the right to carry a concealed weapon under the Second Amendment protection. However, the court reversed its previous opinion and stated that the Second Amendment does not apply to state laws, such as Texas's restriction on carrying dangerous weapons. All of these cases heard before 1900 cemented the court's opinion that the Bill of Rights, and specifically the Second Amendment, does not prohibit states from settling their own rules of gun ownership. During the case of 1939, U.S. versus Miller, Jack Miller and Frank Layton were arrested and accused of carrying an unregistered, sawed-off shotgun across state lines in defiance of the National Firearms Law of 1934. In that case, Miller argued that the National Firearms Act violated the rights under the Second Amendment. But still, the Supreme Court disagreed, ruling, in the absence of any evidence tending to show that possession or use of a shotgun, having a barrel of less than 18 inches in length at this time has some reasonable relationship to the preservation and efficiency of a well-regulated militia. We cannot say that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear such an instrument. The next landmark case will be taken up in the District of Columbia. In 2008, District of Columbia versus Heller, for the first time, the Supreme Court ruled that despite state laws, individuals who were not part of state militia did not have the right to bear arms. As part of this ruling, the court wrote, "The Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia, and to use that firearm for traditionally lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home." That ruling was specific to the federal government and not the states. The court would take up on the issue again in 2 more years, in 2010, in McDonald versus Chicago. The court affirmed its decision in the 2008 case, saying that the Second Amendment applies equally to the federal government and the states. To conclude our presentation, we believe that the Second Amendment helps Americans. We believe this because it helps stop many tragic injuries and deaths each year. Although there are still disadvantages to the Second Amendment, we think that the advantages are much more important. In conclusion, the debate on gun control continues. Incidents like Sandy Hook and Columbine only serve as motivation for both sides to have their opinions heard and considered.